All right. This is a Ford C6 transmission. It's in my Bronco 2 V8 swap. Put this together about 6 months ago, and it's got some transmission leaks. I'm going to take care of those today. You can see fluid. All along the pan. First I thought it might be a pan leak, but I slugged up the pan bolts and it's still leaking. It still could be a pan, but this has got a good rubber gasket in it. I don't think it's the pan. I think it's the servo cover. You can see a little bit of fluid over here coming out of the bottom of it. And also the band adjustment nut has some fluid leaking also. If I can get on it. There it is. You can see that. That's all wet. That usually you just fix with the nut. The nut has a molded washer that's adhered right to it. But I'm just going to clean it up really good and put some silicone on it, adjust the band, and give that a try. If it doesn't work, I can always buy a new nut for it later. So for now, let me set this up in the tripod, and I'll pull the 4 bolts out of the servo cover and pop this servo out. My one worry is that the band will drop. So the band is held in position by the servo pin and by the band adjusting nut and stud on the other side. So once I pop the servo out, I'm not sure if the C6 will let it fall or not. If it does, I'll have to pull the valve body off, which I really don't want to do that, but let's see what happens. Okay, here's all the relevant parts to what they call the intermediate servo. So this is what applies the 1 to 2, the second gear band in the transmission. So the 1-2 shift is handled by this little device. And this is just a standard servo. It's not a high performance unit. I don't think I really need that for this. Little 302 or 5 liter because it's kind of a torqueless wonder. Doesn't need a whole bunch of band apply pressure, so a little bit of sediment in there. So I think that my culprit is either this gasket, which right off the bat Looks good. Let me get it off of there. I don't see any obvious problems with this gasket. We'll set that aside. Or perhaps this O-ring. Get out of there. I don't think it's the O-ring. That O-ring is nice and flexible. Nothing wrong with that O-ring. Let me check it for nicks. I rebuilt this transmission about a decade ago, and I put a lot of high-performance parts in it. It's got 6-pinion wide ratio planetaries out of a 4R100 in it. It's got full Torrington roller bearings, front to rear. And it was in a full-size Bronco. And what I ended up doing was put a 5-speed manual in the full-size Bronco, and I threw this under the workbench for about 10 years. And when I decided to put a V8 in my Bronco 2, I had this transmission, so I just grabbed it and used it. I do intend to put a V or a 5-speed manual in my Bronco 2 at some point, but for now the 3-speed automatic works just fine. Okay, so these match up, and these match up. So there's my parts. Now there is a lip seal. It came with the kit, but this is what they call a bonded piston, where the seal is part of, and we're just going to reuse that. So this part we won't be needing, and I believe that part we won't be needing either. Nope, we won't. Okay, I'm going to get these cleaned up a little bit, and then I'll start putting it back together. All right, back together we go. Cleaned everything with brake cleaner, reasonably clean. Just going to put this all back together. I like to use just ordinary everyday petroleum jelly to lube the stuff. You can use more fancier, I should say, assembly lube, but it really isn't necessary. Ordinary petroleum jelly works just fine. It's petroleum based, just like the ATF that's going to be sealed by it. So. As I was saying, if you had an engine that made big torque, like a big block, you'd probably want to spring for the R servo, the high performance servo, which just has a bigger piston in it. So this is an end piston, which is typical and what you would find with a small block. With the R servos would be able to withstand a lot more torque and keep the second gear band from slipping. Now I'm going to put petroleum jelly on the gasket too, solely so that it stays in place. It's not to seal anything. I just want it to not move around. So I'll put that on. All right. Back together we go. And here we go. So spring goes in first. And make sure this is nice and flat. And it is. I never actually saw anything wrong with any of the seals on this, but what I did notice is the old gasket was really thin and narrow, where the new gasket was a little bit thicker and wider. So I'm hoping that's enough. If not, I might have to double gasket it. All right, on to the band adjustment nut. And that is leak number 2. It's the intermediate band adjustment stud and nut. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull this nut completely off because I want to see why it's leaking. And then I'll clean everything up with brake cleaner and put silicone on the stud and run it back down right before I make my adjustment. So let me pop that thing off real quick. And here is the band lock nut, band stud lock nut. So it's got this molded O-ring that's part of it. And that's kind of worse for wear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel that off. clean that up, and I'm going to just stick an O-ring in there. Give that a try. It should work, and if it doesn't, I can always order a nut later. But this should work. I'll have to put some silicone in the threads. That'll keep ATF from wicking up the threads, and it should work. Now, the procedure for doing this is you run the band adjustment stud in, and you tighten it to 10 foot-pounds. So I've got this little inch-pound wrench. It goes to 100 inch-pounds. 10 foot-pounds is 120 inch-pounds, so it gives me close enough. And once you tighten it to 10 foot-pounds, you back it off 1.5 turns, and then lock the nut down. And it's that simple. That's how you adjust the band on a C6. So I'll get into there and get started on this, get it cleaned up real good, and we'll do that. It's getting tight. I call that good. Now we just have to come out 1.5 turns. So I'm going to go by the nut. Go by the stud. So that square part needs to come around. Quarter. Half. 3/4. 1. 1 1/4. 1.5 turns. Now I need to silicone the threads and put the nut on and tighten it down. And that is the finished product. O-ring underneath the nut, silicone on the threads, everything nice and dry so the silicone actually works. Stud torqued to 10 foot-pounds, backed off 1.5 turns, lock nut tight. I cleaned everything off. There's no more. Well, got a little more to do, I think, right there, but otherwise it looks pretty good. Just have to put the exhaust back on it and fill it full of fluid. Drive it for a day or two and recheck it, see what I get. Hopefully that fixes it.